The order of agenda today is we're going to be hearing the Chateau Theater operating request for proposals. What we're going to do is very briefly, Councilmember Keen wanted to make a quick comment. Then we're going to let staff make an introduction, and then we'll take the proposals in the order that they are in our agenda packet. So that means Exhibits Development Group first, followed by Arts Trust of Minnesota, followed by the Entourage Events Group. So, Mr. Keen, you wanted to make a quick comment.
Good, thank you, President Staver. In my preparation for tonight's meeting, I came across references to ACI, or the Arts and Cultural Initiative. I wanted to disclose to the community that I was a founding member of ACI back in 2016. My involvement ended in 2017, and I was not aware that ACI ever got to the point of seating a board. I don't feel that I have a conflict in the business before the city tonight. Nevertheless, I thought it was in the best interest of transparent government that I disclose this. And that's all I wanted to get out in the open, so thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Parrish, want to kick us off?
Mayor President, members of the council, we really appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. As the council president mentioned, we really have three great proposals for you to consider this evening. It was a result of an RFP process that we went through in parallel with some significant investment that we're doing within the building at this point in time. The format for this evening is for each group to come and talk to you for 20 minutes and then yield to you for 10 minutes worth of questions. We do know that the council has some time sensitivity this evening, and so we are trying to conclude on time before 7 o'clock. And so at the conclusion of the presentations at 6:30, the goal then would be for the council to do a couple of things. One, you could say, we want to direct staff and the DMC team to begin negotiations with a particular team. You could defer that conversation to the May 6th City Council meeting, where you'd have that opportunity to provide direct action, which actually would be requested. You also may defer to staff and ask staff to bring you forward a formal recommendation. It's really kind of your call, but we'd just be looking for your direction on how you'd like to see the next steps proceed. The goal, once we identify a preferred operator that we want to partner with, would then be to negotiate a formal agreement. So think of these proposals this evening as the starting point for the conversation, and then we would be negotiating a final agreement for City Council consideration sometime in June.
All right, Mr. Campion?
Can you just go over what staff are present and what their role is in the process to date?
Yeah, absolutely. And so we had a number of people on the city and DMC team that worked on the evaluation of the proposals. The core group for that was Patrick Sieb with the DMC EDA, Bill Von Bank, DMC EDA, Jamie Rothy. From a city perspective, we had Jenna Bowman actively involved. Mike Nigbert did a tremendous amount of work on this. And then Steve Schmidt from Civic Music and myself. We're really the core people that did the initial evaluation, and our role was really just to receive the proposals, evaluate them, provide them feedback, and then give them the opportunity to refine those to present to you this evening so they could be positioned to be as successful as possible. When we evaluated the proposals, we really did it against the criteria in the RFP, which focused on the maximum amount of activation, operating support if requested, and then the capital contributions to make the building functional. Another important timeline that is in play here is the May DMC board meeting. There would be a capital request made at that time, at least to get the financial authorization, if there is any needed in order to support capital improvements within the building. One of the things we'll evaluate in conjunction with that is what are improvements we would likely anticipate for any long-term future reuse of the building versus what are temporary in order for their use to proceed.
Mr. Wojcik?
I know that we're going to have a lot of folks here and watching that don't always watch city council meetings. So I was wondering if you could give me a brief synopsis of how this plays into the big picture, because we're doing a partial renovation. Right now, there's the opportunity to perhaps do more of a renovation in the future. What is the timeline we're looking at for this? What is the timeline to seeing more bigger improvements in the future? What are the decision points?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, this is an opportunity to activate the building. We bought it a couple of years ago. We're in the process of doing renovations right now. We anticipate those will conclude sometime in June. And then from there, we wanted to have a partner for this 3 to 5 year window that we could work with to activate the space, to move toward those goals that I mentioned previously, within that time frame, it gives us a sense of, how do we want to move toward the longer, bigger vision for that facility. We anticipate it's going to be a unique partnership that involves working with the private sector in pursuing state and federal historic tax credits. We don't have the predetermined use. We certainly have a great starting point for the conversation with the reuse committee's work that was done. But I do think this gives us a period of time in which to do some additional due diligence to sort of develop consensus on what that long-term vision is for the facility, and then put a financial structure to it that all the different stakeholders can be fine with.
And then the other question, maybe this is more appropriately directed to the city attorney, but frequently we're in a capacity where we're applying some predetermined set of rules to an application. In this case, this is largely not necessarily driven by compliance with the legal policy, but rather, vision of what the community should be. My understanding is, post these discussions, any council members pretty much free to speak freely on the topic ahead of any future action that might happen, as we have a lot of discretion on that.
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
So, and that's not always the case. The reason why I ask that is sometimes we are in a quasi-judicial capacity where we shouldn't really be talking about our thoughts on something. Council members can speak freely about this.
It'd be a legislative function, yes.
All right. So first up, we have the Exhibits Development Group.
Thank you, Aaron. Good afternoon, Mayor and distinguished council. Thank you very much. My name is Amy Noble Seitz. I'm the founder, CEO, and chairwoman of Exhibits Development Group and its affiliated companies. To my right and my left are the EDG veterans and my right and left arm. Jessica Grambaugh is our senior creative manager and is responsible for the brand integrity of EDG, the marketing we conduct globally, and our companies and the brands which we are grateful stewards. To my left is Liz Frericks, the Director of Operations, the Deputy Chief. Liz handles EDG operations, shareholder, investor, and stakeholder relations, including the many contracts we have throughout the international cultural world. Between the three of us, we have 12 children, making the world a better place. And for those at EDG who are spread out doing the work in the world today, we could not have the honor, or that could not have the honor of standing in front of you, we want to thank you for this exciting opportunity to present our proposal for the activation, programming, and economic impact we will bring to the Chateau Theater, thanks to the renovation and restoration you are making possible through the Rochester taxpayers and the larger community of stakeholders to protect and preserve this gem. It has been a sheer pleasure working with the professionals from the City of Rochester, the colleagues from the DMC, and our friends in the Rochester community, including Mayo Clinic, Lim Lab, DALO, the University of Minnesota, and other important stakeholders who have provided valuable research and feedback on our proposal. I would be remittent if I did not thank the countless friends in the family from Rochester, Stewartville, Owatonna, Byron, Zumbrota, and Blooming Prairie who are cheering us on. Yes, I am a Blooming Prairie blossom from the prairie. Many in this community know I've had my eye on the Chateau and the unfortunate demise of the Barnes & Noble, so we could bring our exhibitions and programming to this amazing, magical location called the Plaza and bring further sizable impact on the city and deliver meaningful educational and cultural impact on the community of Rochester and the state of Minnesota. As the leader in international museum community, our mission is to bring international cultural exchange to this city and cities worldwide through the traveling exhibitions, live entertainment experiences, and the dynamic programming surrounding these events, including music and entertainment, STEM, STEAM, and creativity festivals, lectures, music, literature, and poetry events supported by retail and hospitality. EDG has activated projects in nearly 200 cities in North America. The team, curiously dubbed the Exhibitionists by our friends at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., where we held offices for 10 years, has developed and toured exhibitions on 6 continents. We have produced more than $25 million worth of exhibitions and developed 5 separate operating companies, including our last company called Culture Nut Exchange, a global distribution platform similar to eBay. We have had the pleasure of leading major activation projects with countries such as Egypt, Israel, France, Italy, the United Kingdom, Hungary, Australia, New Zealand, and throughout the Americas. We've delivered more than 200 major exhibitions on time and on or under budget. EDG has not failed to deliver a project, a contract, or an operational service. We have never had a client not fulfill their contract in hosting our exhibitions, and we have not had a lender or a partner exhibition unfill their obligation of our tours. Currently, we have 40 exhibitions touring somewhere in the world, and more than that, equal to that in development with our partners in America, Italy, France, Sweden, and the United Kingdom. So similar to the opportunity that we have to activate the Chateau Theater with daily programming that will be summarized with you today, EDG has been selected, invited, and hired to develop museums and cultural venues to bring vitality and sustainability to cities and cultural centers. In Minnesota, locally, EDG was hired to develop a museum at the Landmark Center in St. Paul for Minnesota's oldest cultural institution. We are currently creating a cultural venue at our headquarters at the Union Depot in downtown St. Paul, which was renovated in 2012, identified to be a major tenant to bring vitality and visitors to Minnesota's most significant architectural gem and transportation hub. EDG created and operated a museum venue in 2017 for an upstate New York mall and gallery owner called Destiny USA, where we brought $7 million worth of exhibitions in 9 months. In 2010, the board of directors of the James J. Hill Library in Rice Park hired EDG to convert the historic library and that architectural gem into a Kunsthalle, or a cultural center, as we wish to do at the Chateau. We brought an exhibition and developed a music series called the Americana Showcase, co-developed with Rochester's dynamic CEO of Limb Lab, musical talent Brandon Sampson, together with 20 other leading Minnesota artists behind our partnership, the Minnesota Museum Coalition. Now, as I transition to the team, the EDG team consists of a core team of 12 in the Minnesota and Europe office in Denmark, with a vast network of collaborators, including museums, cultural institutions, including embassies, countries, cultural sectors, theater designers, amusement park designers, scholars in science, art, history, and popular culture, authors, leading musicians, artists, and so many who are best in their breed. We rely on vetted and trusted subcontractors who are the best in their skill, including curators, exhibition fabricators, logistic experts, insurance aficionados, installation experts, lighting designers, and art handlers, to name a few. Each project we develop with robust programming consists of 30 to 100 experts doing what they do best. It's very similar to making a film or a Broadway event. Rather than distributing through the theaters or the cinemas, we are using the cultural center. We use museums, black boxes, and beautiful historic gems like the Chateau. Now Liz will share the invaluable and sometimes immeasurable impact of culture on a community, a state, and a nation. In the global world, we call this soft power. Soft power is often the largest humanitarian effort of sharing culture and educating through cultural institutions and our educational systems. Hard power being the military and peacekeeping initiatives of a nation. Jessica will share the marketing, the partnership, and those intrinsic values held with such partnerships. EDG is a global brand ambassador. Whether it is touring national treasures such as the Emancipation Proclamation, or Italy's Da Vinci's, or the Discovery Channel's Mythbusters, or the National Geographic Explorers. Jessica and the marketing arm bring our projects alive. Now let's let Elizabeth share a little bit more about the activation in year one.
I want to talk a little bit about the economic impact before we get into year one. Culture, it fuels the economy. The arts and culture sector is an $800 billion industry representing 4% of the nation's GDP. That's a larger percentage of the economy than transportation, tourism, or agriculture. But probably more important is what a cultural venue, such as the Chateau as EDG envisions it, can do for Rochester. The arts and culture are good for local businesses. Beyond the cost of admission, attendees pay for parking, eat at a local restaurant, enjoy dessert or coffee after an event, and even possibly return home to pay the babysitter. All valuable revenue for a local commerce and community. A vibrant cultural community not only keeps residents and the discretionary spending close to home, but it also attracts visitors and drives tourism, who spend money at hotels, restaurants, and other local businesses. Some examples of how exhibitions can do this include EDG's Dressing Downton exhibition. This exhibition traveled to historic homes, small art museums, and cultural centers around the US, generating more than $50 million for host venues from 2015 to 2018. The final venue to host Dressing Downton was the Lightner Museum in St. Augustine, Florida. It was awarded the 2017 Tourism Impact Award due to the boost in hotel occupancy and revenues during the months the exhibition was in St. Augustine. Additionally, venues use exhibitions to leverage their gala events and fundraisers. For example, the International Exhibition of Sherlock Holmes generated more than $600,000 when a Tier A science institution leveraged it for its annual fundraising gala. The culture industry is an economic engine for communities. It wouldn't be possible in this endeavor to quantify the economic impact of exhibitions without also considering the cultural and educational value. These economies need to exist alongside one another in order to maintain the strength of both, which is a magic formula EDG has developed that makes our exhibits and experiences impactful for communities and successful for stakeholders. Visiting exhibitions is proven to have a meaningful effect on people's lives. It encourages reflection, exploration, and defining of cultural values. It promotes an enhanced sense of well-being and improved quality of life. It generates a sense of belonging. It encourages visitors to open themselves to different attitudes and perceptions. It provides visitors the opportunity to celebrate and share personal histories and heritage. Our exhibitions and programs will educate through their expert content in STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics, as well as history, music, literacy, social studies, and popular culture. The educational components are developed through deep partnerships with schools, universities, and fellow cultural institutions. It's been documented that students who attend field trips to an exhibition experience an increase in critical thinking skills, historical empathy, and tolerance. For students from rural or high-poverty regions, the increase is even greater. But field trips are just the beginning of the list of offerings, which can include demonstrations and workshops, school outreach programs, professional development for teachers, curriculum materials, and program for homeschoolers. The education within exhibition nurtures creativity and curiosity, but it isn't limited to the confines of the building. Through special programs and outreach, these roots of knowledge spread through the community and beyond, reflecting the unique diversity and development of Rochester and the DMC. I'm going to let Amy tell you a little bit more about the vision for the Chateau.
Well, let's just say you've made our job quite easy. You have a perfect exhibition space for multi-function use. So our intention is to activate the space on every day, except for major holidays that will be agreed with the city. The core exhibition or event space is 5,000 square feet, which happens to be the perfect size for most traveling exhibition and experiences. That will be supported by a retail lounge and cafe that will always be open. There is ample administration, office, storage, restrooms as it currently exists. And then we'll get into the financials and the attendance projections a little bit later. And now we'll turn it over to the gals to talk about some of the programming that we're intending on doing in year one.
So, talking a little bit about the exhibitions. The first one we would like to program is Beyond Rubik's Cube. This is a very unique exhibition. It's a STEAM-based exhibition inspired by 40 years of playing with the world's most popular puzzle. It's developed with our colleagues at the Liberty Science Center in Jersey City, together with Google and Erno Rubik himself. It's a highly interactive physical digital challenge, complete with puzzles, robotic manipulations, music, art, and original artifacts. The programming is endless, with group trips, school field trips, camps, Girl Scouts, 4-H, educational outreach to preschool, university level, outbound STEM, interactive presentations to classes and community groups, lectures from experts in the scientific and cultural realm, speed cubing competitions, of course, adult game nights, birthday parties, perhaps a Guinness World Record event. And the exhibit itself includes a cube mosaic, which could be done in the exhibition, or perhaps on Peace Plaza or at the Mayo. Following Beyond Rubik's Cube and opening in the winter months, in the cold February, could be the Beatles exhibition, the Magical History Tour. It's this exhibition highlights the pivotal points of the band's history through artifacts, memorabilia, and fun interactives. It starts from the birth, goes through their breakup, and even beyond. And of course, this could be programmed with all sorts of music festivals, which be aligned with current Rochester concerts, events, and programming on Peace Plaza as well. We would partner with the Minnesota Music Coalition, and also outreach to music education. It could be lectures and presentations from regional experts, Beatles movie nights, adult game nights, outdoor concerts, community storytelling, inviting the community to talk about their Beatles experience, because there's definitely Beatles stories, and adult events and cocktails. Beatlemania for sure.
Yeah, so following the Beatles, we propose an exhibition of cultural costumes or pop-up culture artifact exhibitions. Some could be Downton Abbey, Jane Austen, Cinematic Couture, Alexander McQueen. We also have a brand new partnership with the Harley-Davidson Museum. So we could also bring the art, science, and history of the Harley-Davidson to the Chateau. Photography exhibitions also have a big impact on attendance. For example, the Elvis Presley photo exhibit was the #1 attended exhibition at the National Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C. The photo exhibits are also affordable, they're easy to pop up, and the breadth is endless. Programming for these type of exhibitions could be fan-centric events, lectures, presentations, themed dinners. We have adult events, cocktail nights, trunk shows, fashion and car shows, music events as well. So what happens during the deinstall, and there's always the installation and deinstallation of these exhibitions. In between these times, EDG plans to develop and curate smaller exhibitions. We could do the history of the Chateau Theater, DMC, Rochester, and Southern Minnesota. For example, that would be on display during these install and deinstall periods for the locals and visitors to enjoy. EDG could also supplement these periods with other events, including local Rochester artists, small gallery exhibitions, local history programs, lectures, music events, and more. So with each of these exhibitions also comes a robust marketing campaigns and powerful partnerships. EDG is able to harness these partnerships, are able to harness these strong partnerships like BBC, National Geographic, and Discovery Channel by leveraging their media giants with local and national reach. Our plans for the marketing strategy for the Chateau will not only be to bring in local audiences, but will also be to pull from bordering states. We will be catering to the DMC and the diverse contingency that it serves, including southeastern Minnesota, the greater Midwest, and the vast international communities served by the Rochester and its stakeholders. We are very excited for this opportunity as we have been developing a relationship with Rochester and the Mayo Clinic for the last 8 years. We see the opportunity that is here in Rochester, being able to serve one of the most dynamic and diverse communities in America. And of course, the marketing is very important with the help and support from partnerships within the city, like the Area Chamber of Commerce, the Visitors Bureau, local businesses, and then naturally the press and media that have been so supportive of this wonderful endeavor. And now we will have Liz discuss what we need from you.
To piggyback on what Amy was saying earlier, we first want to thank you. You have created the perfect canvas for EDG to program and display our exhibitions. There are only a few very important details we need you to invest in, which will allow us to bring the largest breadth of projects and programming, such as exhibits, events, really creating a multifunctional space. These items include a lighting system, a temporary wall system, which will help create layouts and mount exhibition components, electrical and power to power up those interactives and AV components, load-in improvements, including roll-up doors and improvements to the back alley doors, which will allow us to get inside, and a security system. We believe this will be a great success. And in 3 to 5 years, if we aspire to bring in the highest level of exhibitions to the like of King Tut or Pompeii, we may call on you for additional capital investments. But now I'm going to let Amy talk a little bit of dollars and cents with you.
There's only 2 minutes left, right? So how do we fulfill this tall order? How do we pay for this? How much will we require from the city and its stakeholders? And what will the return in dollars and cents for the activation cost us? First, EDG owns, co-owns, or distributes a portfolio of exhibitions and the related programming that have ever been created. Matter of fact, we currently have 40 projects valued at more than $40 million in production value. This is our contribution to the city of Rochester. Of course, we need revenues to support these initiatives, and they come largely from earned revenues through admission sales, sponsorships, grants, and prepaid events by members and stakeholders in the community. In addition, we will derive further revenues from the special events, retail hospitality components, and those sections devoted to the operations and programming. We will activate the space every day, except for major holidays. The cafe and retail area will always be operative, and the exhibition gallery, music, multi-programming, special corporate event space will be activated 40 of the 52 weeks. The other weeks are those transition periods earlier noted. In between the installation and the deinstallation of these major exhibition projects, we will have the pop-up events that Jessica earlier noted. And we cannot wait during those periods to tease the community with what is to come. So, the most important element of being vibrant and profitable is attendance. This comes from the captive audience of Rochester, the surrounding community, the bordering states, and most importantly, the 8+ million visitors that come to Rochester each year. This is what we call the capture rate in the museum world. So if we are successful, we aim to capture 10% of this audience. So looking at the revenues, we are looking at a base year revenue capture rate of 120,000 paid visitors to the Chateau Theater. This also creates our break even. If we bring in additional sponsorship, grants, and pre-sales, which we estimate at 500,000, we do have a sizable net return. If we go to full capacity, which could be possible with these projects, we would be at 360,000 annual paid visitors. You can see that everything looks interesting at full capacity. And that is through partnerships and very astute marketing. Okay, here are some of the key partners that will be necessary. I don't need to read those to you. You know who you are. You're sitting in the audience. Moving on to the next slide. Ultimately, it is EDG's intent to bring international culture bring the partnerships and the wonderful resources that are already here. There are many, and we are confident that Exhibits Development Group would be the right partner for you to select in this endeavor. Thank you very much for inviting us here today.
So, questions and answers, a few minutes for that. Do you have any comments, council members would care to follow up on? Mr. Campion.
I would just say the capital improvements, I assume it doesn't clearly articulate in here, but the city would retain ownership of all the capital improvements, correct? You guys
Yes.
have any? Okay, that's it.
Mr. Wojcik.
All right. My daughters are 7 and 11. What do you have that gets them excited?
Everything.
They do get excited.
So
about
in,
just about everything.
in serious response, every project that we create, at least 25% of all visitors is derived from school groups.
School groups, okay. And I'm particularly interested in terms of the usership. Schools have fixed financial resources, and every school is struggling with funding issues, and so cost certainly comes into play in some of this. And we also have an added challenge in Rochester. Approximately 40% of our kids in school are on free and reduced lunch, and we have the school age population is very diverse. A lot of children of color from here and all over the world. I'm curious what programs you've done in the past to particularly try and engage some of these groups that we don't necessarily always think about first and foremost.
Another wonderful question, and the response to that is everyone who hosts our exhibitions throughout the world has that same exact challenge, whether it's Chicago, Kansas City, Mobile, Alabama, throughout the world. So it is very important that accessibility is offered, free accessibility, discounted accessibility, and partnerships that we mentioned before help make that happen. Right here in the state of Minnesota, we are very, very proud to be a part of the Clean Water and Legacy Amendment Act. That is different, and people all over the world see that as a platform, right, to have great success in getting that accessibility. And then Target Corporation, many of you are familiar that they have created a sustainable model for institutions around our country to offer free days and children days, thanks to their generosity. So we will definitely be aligning those initiatives. That's a really great question.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, Mr. Keen.
Yeah, thanks for being here today. I have two questions, one particular to your presentation. When you talk about having the food services, is that your group, or are you thinking you're bringing in some vendor?
For which?
When you talk about having a food service and coffee, is that your group, or are you perceiving that to be a vendor you're going to hire?
Yes, we'll activate that. So, of course, we were going to aim to get a liquor license at the Chateau Theater, but there will not be a full operating kitchen in year one. So we definitely have ideas on how we will bring food and beverage to the cafe without having a operating kitchen through partnerships here in Rochester.
It's not your employees coming in to do that.
We'll be operating it, but we will be securing the catering and the partnerships through the Rochester community.
Okay. And then my other, it's more of a generic question for all the proposals. You come in with the business plans that, again, I like the way you scoped it to the low end, but if they don't come through, I believe all the business risk is on your end, or is the city assuming any additional business risk with the property?
Your risk is the capital improvements going into the property.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
So exhibits are the dominant activity occurring. How long does an exhibit typically stay? How frequently do they rotate?
That's a great question. They typically are 3 months to 6 months.
Okay. So, and then there's probably some downtime as you change out exhibits and so forth, but largely the facility stays active most of the time?
That's correct.
What would you do during that downtime when you're changing out exhibits?
Right. So the cafe and the retail area will always be open, and then there'll be small pop-up events such as the photography or local initiatives that we're doing during that time.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other questions for this presenter? All right, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Next up, we have the Arts Trust of Minnesota.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Oh,
Like the Vikings jersey.
Yeah.
thank you.
That's the whole.
Hey, if I wanted to hear this so badly, I would have been there.
Good answer.
So I'm here just for you guys. Well, all of the presenters.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Misha Johnson. I'm a resident of Rochester, Minnesota. I was born here. I graduated from Mayo High School. I currently am the executive director of Immersion Youth Repertory here in Rochester, which is in our third year. I left and I spent 16 years in Denver, Colorado in the performing arts, professional performing arts field out there. And now here we are, the Chateau proposal here for the Arts Trust of Minnesota. I'm here with the Arts Trust of Minnesota and with our community partners, and I thank you for this opportunity to present today. The Arts Trust of Minnesota was created with the sole intention of activating the Chateau Theater and reviving this iconic space as a performing arts venue, multi-purpose community space, and more importantly, giving it back to the community. Now, while the Arts Trust of Minnesota is a newly created organization, we're fully aware of that. Our growing list of community partners, as you can see, their experience and expertise collectively add up to over 100 years of industry experience. They have produced over 350 theatrical productions, 3,000 concerts, 6,250 weddings, and 25,000 events. They are excited and committed to contributing to programming to the Chateau's calendar of events over the coming years, if selected. We have created a mission statement as ADAM serves as a central nucleus that brings an infinite variety of arts and cultural organizations, both locally and nationally, educational and presentational, to activate, enrich, and elevate the community of Rochester, Minnesota. To accommodate this type of programming, we are proposing this floor plan, as you see, courtesy of HGA. Specifically, we're adding a partition that to accommodate an art gallery, an artisan market, as well as a servery for catered events, a stage with professional light and sound equipment, a projector with a screen to accommodate movies, events, and presentations. We are also proposing adding one bathroom in the rear and 2 doors to better navigate the flow of traffic to the restrooms and green room area. We have spent a great deal of time with the Miller-Dunwoody proposal, and we've listened to the community. And from these findings, we really have tried to create a diverse calendar offerings to ensure that the Chateau is open daily and will not only engage our local community, but will also help Rochester emerge as an arts and cultural destination. So the use of the theater, as you'll see here, we've created this graph that the space will be an arts consortium. It will be used for a variety of events, including a new dinner theater, hosting some of Rochester's already active theater companies, orchestras, music organizations. We are proposing bringing back movies to the Chateau with the help of the International Film Festival, Twin Cities Film Festival, and the new local Grey Duck Theater. This space will include educational classes, as well as a gallery and artisan market. Our proposal also has the opportunity to integrate other meetings, events, weddings, and community gatherings. This is really just the beginning of our proposal, as we had about 6 weeks to prepare it when the RFP came out. So this is really just the beginning, and we're very excited about it. We have created an activation space. So part of this also came out of, we have seen many theaters. I have personally seen it where they operate on a repertory basis. So you have many different types of events all in one building. So you can see there's something we're calling Rise to Shine, which we want this to be open to the community all the time. Whoever wants to book it. If it's a yoga group, if it is a meeting that wants to happen down there, if it's whoever wants to book it, 8 to 9, open to the public, no charge. You can show up there. We're showing that you can also have a meeting, whether it's whatever community group, if that's Mayo, if that's someone else, great. Movies can be shown. We're proposing at least 10 a month. If not more, we can show that there's concerts. There's also movies there. You can show that there's a variety of events that's open all the time to the public. Here's for November. This is a fully activated space. And then we're calling the Nook, which is the second floor space that is a meeting room, rehearsal room, and can have lots of things happening all the time. And it's pretty wide open right now with what we, more connections to be made. The daily activation, again, this will be open every day. So a gallery, art gallery, retail space, artisan market, and then this morning group called Rise to Shine, community gathering space, having a concession partner where people can come in and enjoy the Chateau, enjoy the art that's on the wall, etc. And here is the audience served, as you can see. We underestimated our attendance levels, so we have a total people served of 84,400 people with a different variety of events that you can see. Everything from children's theater, dinner theater, regional theater, quite a variety of events. We want to bring movies back into the Chateau, which is an important thing that we heard a lot from our community. Adam's investment, what our board will bring to the table. We want to make sure that we are providing that gallery space. We're providing those retail options that you can buy. We're providing all of that concession equipment. And so that is $10,000 worth of equipment that we would provide as an organization. And then I'm going to bring up Kevin Dobie to the table.
Hi, my name is Dr. Kevin Dobie. Just a 20-second introduction. I am a full-time faculty at Rochester Community College. I'm a regional artist and a digital media artist as well. My interests are technology integration with music and new medias. So that is the auspice by which I've been brought onto this group, is to bring that expertise, particularly the connection with the educational component, which I'll get to in a moment. So one of the larger segments of our expenditures really are the capital equipment for sound, lights, that type of thing to help with the stage. Because we realize that we're an intermediate group, really, we're going to be using this space in the next 3-5 years, whatever that period of time might be, until the larger vision comes to fruition. And what we really felt was important is that we choose equipment that would not only serve the short-term needs, those 3 to 5 year, but then would tie in professionally to the space as it would be activated in future events. So the equipment that you see on the list in front of you, and I'm assuming that's this here. Here we go. Okay, going the opposite way. Here we go. It would be for connections to spaces, to green rooms, and so on and so forth. I'll just let you read through that. That would be able to make the intermediate use of the stage area basically operational for its use without fly space, not being able to still use it with theater. And that is why we really are connecting in this next area of light and sound. We are proposing bringing in professional quality video into the space that would then be used for all the activities, as Michelle indicated, the theater, movie events, and so on and so forth. But we're also wanting to have that be a part of theater activation. When there are presentations, there could be a 40-foot screen behind, and that could be part of making that place of interest to not only to the arts events, but to people who might be using the space. So with regard to the light and sound, the 4 elements that we are looking at is the flexibility, so that it can be used for multiple events, expandability, so that it can build into that next developmental phase of what the Chateau will turn into, the educational connection, and then having it be cost effective. The educational connection is, again, a part of one of the 2 main areas that I would be interfacing with the group with, is the equipment sets would be similar to the equipment sets that are used at the college for our music technology programs. And the music technology programs have had students that graduate, and as a matter of fact, run a number of Rochester's downtown events, are graduates from that program. And that type of equipment would then connect from the educational components so that students who are seeking to do this as a career path would then do internship as a part of our activities there. So we would have it be a direct learning experience for the Rochester students and then connect it directly to the event. The musical aspect, again, one of the things that I've done in this community, I've lived here about 35 years, is I've basically written for all of the major ensembles in the area. I've written 6 pieces for the Rochester Symphony Orchestra, choral arts ensembles, honors choir, so on and so forth. And my hope is also to be a music connection person. Misha is a theater person. She's super strong in all sorts of areas, but theater is her main area. My main area is music and then digital media and technology. So that's the lion's share of the equipment expanding. And to continue this now is Chris.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Christopher Thomas Williams. It's a bad habit saying my middle name. I'm a local here, Rochester native, born and raised, graduated Mayo High School in 1999. I raised have a family of 3, graduate of Mayo High School and then Crossroads College. So I've been here nearly my whole life. Excited for the opportunity to share about this opportunity to be a part of Chateau Theater. Our city investments and operations, startup costs for technical staff, startup costs for website development, startup costs for marketing and promotions. What we're asking for total is $376,000. I'm sorry, thank you. And this includes all of the things previously discussed, including stage, lights, building alterations, and so on and so forth. The lease agreement, let's see if I can figure this out here. Lease agreement is Adam requests all taxes, insurance, utilities, garbage, etc. to be paid for by the city until January 1st, 2020. Adam will enter into a gross lease on January 1st, 2020. Rent will be $1 monthly. And then there will be a $2 per ticket historic preservation fund account. And then we will have a percentage rent for the people using the space. Rochester will remain as the landlord of the Chateau Theater. Revenue and projections, we had a very conservative estimation, and these are obviously based on the numbers you saw previously, which include the events that we will have in the space, the shows, the dinner theater, the weddings, the way that the spaces, we intend to use the space. And so though what you see here is the total revenue, estimated total revenue, expense projections for the Chateau. We're so thankful for the opportunity. Hope we get an opportunity. I'm going to pass it back to Misha.
The continued community and group engagement. This is a huge portion of Adam's goal and mission is to be, its potential and its programming really lies within the enthusiasm and the opportunity to return the Chateau back to the community it serves. And we are proud to be able to provide this type of platform and excited to have also the opportunity to work with new groups. And of course, those groups, especially having Thursdays on First, having programming within the Chateau, Heart of the City, Social Ice, Mayo Clinic, Destination Medical Center, Downtown Alliance, and working with all those groups with advertising and social media. Just spoke with KTTC and Post Bulletin and other organizations this week about possible opportunities within there if we were granted this space. So it's continually supported. We also started a petition online. Kathleen, if you wouldn't mind handing those out. We just started a support. So far we had received, when we had put this out here, we had received over 334 signatures. We were up to, I think it's 378 and growing, which is great to be able to have that support, and some of those comments are really important there.
One of the comments that we really appreciated was this proposal offers a pathway to the long-term use plan put forth by the Chateau Theater Task Force by building community partnerships and helping to develop the Chateau as a leading arts venue. Adam will invigorate our arts community and improve the quality of life in Rochester. Another one is from Alan, who says, I strongly believe that the Chateau belongs to Rochester and should have Rochester groups in charge of promoting Rochester activities for Rochester people and visitors. And my hope is to see the theater given back to the community. And that's really what we're about. We are formed as a nonprofit. We are here with our blood, sweat, and tears. We're not here to make a dollar. We're here to help these organizations give this theater back to the community is really what this is all about. Here is our community partners again that we have promised to help program the space, or we can help provide them some resources within their rehearsals, within their programming itself. Again, we realize that we are the interim. We want to help be the bridge in what's next for the city, in what they choose to do. We certainly are a partner. We don't mean to be the end-all be-all. We certainly want to work with the city and what's next for them and what is to come. And our partners, we believe, is the answer to help make that bridge accessible for the community of Rochester and for the future of Rochester. And we thank you for your time and support. Thank you so much for letting us have this opportunity.
Once again, are there any initial questions or comments from the
Thank you.
council? Mr. Wojcik?
Okay. So you had 6 weeks to put this together.
Right.
I mean, that's good work for 6 weeks. I mean, that's a tough schedule. So I understand that things are still kind of evolving, and most of the questions that I prepared in advance largely has to do with the what if scenarios under the financial, and so some of these maybe staff might have to help me with as well. But because you're a new organization, I mean, this is kind of going to be a pay-as-you-go thing. Do you have startup capital from anyone, or how do you get those first shows in? How do you get those first events put on?
Yeah, if I may. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the beauty behind this, first and foremost, is that the organizations that we have a built-in audience. They have a built-in audience already ready to come to the space. So all the organizations that are there are going to be required to have a deposit on the space, of course, and beforehand, since we're starting our rent intentionally in January, that allows for us to start selling season tickets, to approach sponsorships. So when we have those sponsorships, we're able to start those dinner theater shows, speaking with Pepper Entertainment, bringing those national concert tours there and working with them for that. That answers that for you.
Very good, thank you. So I'm interested in what goes into those rental dollars that you have in the budget. Is this talking about renting space internally to the organizations that are there? Is this trying to go out and seek outside business and get meetings hosted in the location?
Yeah, so a lot of the community partners that are listed there, they would be, a lot of it honestly is profit share is what we're calling it. And so an organization is welcome to have their rehearsals there. We share their profit. The main source of the income for the Chateau Theater would be the dinner theater, would be the concerts, and would be the vendors and the artisan market.
And that's what I want to check, because it's not that you're necessarily looking to attract meetings from outside organizations to come in and use the space. This is the organizers or the people that are part of it that are really the ones that are paying that rental income.
Oh, absolutely. But it's open. It is open for meetings if people want to come in and rent that space. Absolutely. But it's mostly for the organization's a part of it.
Well, I appreciate that, there's a lot of places that book a lot of rental income in terms of attracting meetings, and I haven't seen one that's actually hit their numbers yet. So
right.
I appreciate the clarification.
Absolutely.
Your approach makes much more sense. Taking a look at your staffing plan, I mean, you have a fair number. Are these going to be full-time staff positions, or are these going to be positions whereby, this is going to be a second job kind of role?
There will be absolutely full-time positions that are there, especially executive director, especially the creative director who will serve as the organizer, the calendar operator who will be in charge of all that, the technical director, absolutely, those people will be full-time. We understand coming into this that, again, we are donating our time and energy up front.
Yeah.
And so I think you're talking more than 40 hours a week.
Well, and I think part of the, the dollar amounts that you have in there for these very, for some of these positions, they're kind of in that tricky Rochester range.
Yes.
Where
Thank you.
it's
Yes.
it's hard to afford to live in this community on some of those salaries. So are you confident do you have the right people for some of these positions? Are you confident you'll be able to find them?
We have the current people that we do have lined up for that have already agreed to that type of dollar amount. And the ones that we would be needing to acquire would be specifically the technical director, which would absolutely need to be negotiated with them.
And then kind of my last question on the finances is what I like to do in my day job is I always ask the question, what is the consequences if revenue in the first year is 30% short? I'm interested in how you'd respond to that, because you're not coming into this with capital reserves necessarily, and ultimately it looks like the only options are perhaps salary cuts or other modifications. How would you deal with that possibility?
And that's a great question. That's why we specifically put the January 1st timeline on there, so that we can have that build up and we can have that capital to eventually make sure that we can pay our employees fairly and make sure we can cover that. And that's a really key critical element there, so that utilities would be paid for by the city until that time, and then we'd be able to take that over.
When you look at the big picture at the numbers you have out there, the first couple years are really, really tight, even assuming some fairly substantial growth, and it's not even until that third year that you start to see a little bit of margin coming in. I mean, that'll be the biggest concern. I'll probably follow up with some additional questions, but feel free if you want to respond to that as well.
I was going to also add that because we are an arts consortium, arts groups notoriously, we operate under blood, sweat, and tears. I mean, so no, really, that's what we do. So we're coming into this not as business people in that sense. So we do realize that, I mean, Misha has a great deal of business experience in the arts. That's why we are following here. We're just so happy to have her leading us here. But the rest of us, we're here because we believe strongly that the arts are an important part of our community. And we're willing to come forward and do work, and we're willing to volunteer. So there are a lot of people like me. There are a lot of arts people who will step forward. And if we have a beautiful space in which to share that with the community, people will come forward, and that's what we're anticipating to have as well.
And the list is long already. Let's be clear. The list is long already.
And I appreciate the answer to these, because these are a lot of the questions that other people in the community are asking. It's important that this is the time that you get a chance to respond to some of these. So I very much appreciate that.
Very fair questions.
Yep. That's what I had. Thank you.
Mr. Keen.
Yeah, thanks for being here today. It's kind of an interesting group of brand new, but then you have this reach with all these other groups that shows more depth. One kind of hard question for me or thing is this group up here already funds the Rochester Civic Theater. Is there anything you could say to help me feel that I'm not competing with myself by funding more theater?
Absolutely. And so I have already prepared that because I expected it. Because Spokane, Washington is a town the same size of ours. They have 6 theaters, 2 professional and 3 children's theaters, all in the same town. More art is more art. And we are a separate institution. Dinner theater is separate from what the Rochester Civic Theater does. And there's no reason why the Rochester Civic Theater can't thrive, the Rochester Repertory can't thrive, and the Chateau Theater can't thrive. There's absolutely no reason at all. And with the number of visitors that we receive per year, in addition to the population we have, absolutely no reason.
And if I could add to that.
Yeah, please.
So I just designed the last 3 digital shows for Civic Theater. So I did Shrek, Annie, and just recently Jesus Christ Superstar. If they called me up and said, Kevin, would you do another show? I'll do it in a second, and I'll volunteer my time. Just as I'll come here and volunteer here. So volunteers, as Misha said, I believe that we're big enough to have a number of theaters, but we'll also have enough people in this community who wish to step forward and volunteer. And so I think we have it covered under both aspects.
Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I had one question. At your core, you're arts oriented, which makes sense. And what the thing I wonder is kind of tagging on with Councilmember Keen's question, and I didn't see some other stakeholder or potential partners, whether it be SEMVA or Arts and Cultural Trust or some other groups, how do we make sure that we're not duplicating functions or programming and essentially depleting each other's audience?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know that in the process of preparing this RFP, our children's theater company was actually seeking a space, which is how we ended up messaging the Chateau Task Force saying, hey, what's going on with the space? And was then led to this proposal. So there is a great need for space in this community. And I know the Arts and Cultural Initiative, which originally proposed for the Armory, that was one of their main things is seeking space. So I think it's all balanced. I think it's all balanced out if we're helping provide space and a platform for other people. I think it's not duplicating.
Okay, all right. Anyone else? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, and last but not least, we have the Entourage Events Group presentation.
Clicker. Good evening, Council President, Mayor Norton, council members. Thank you for your time today. I appreciate you letting us propose. We're excited to be back in front of council again, after the Armory process. And thank you, city staff, for your hard work on getting this RFP through and going through that process as well. Since we have some new council members here and the Armory process was, a while ago, I do want to kind of touch on, how, our partnership kind of got brought up from the past. So in 2010, I was heavily in the music industry here locally. I was managing an artist here named Alex Wu, Lourdes graduate. I'm also a Mayo graduate, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And he was getting a lot of Mayo people, right? Yeah, it's great. So he was getting some buzz locally on the music scene, and Steve and his brother graciously allowed us to come into one of their venues. We ended up selling that out in 2010 in Minneapolis, but he really took a chance on a Rochester local artist that ended up catapulting him, our artist, into having the #5 album in the country and doing world tours, and really growing us at a young age as well. So it's incredible to see him supporting Rochester from way back then. So we were able to maintain our relationship for the past decade and supporting one another. And when the Armory came up, obviously I said, hey, this is an opportunity for us to, add some real value into Rochester. We didn't get it, but Castle Community is doing a great job. And so when the Chateau opportunity came about, I said, hey, Steve, we should take a look at how this could work. It's a different business model. The Armory would have been our building, all the expenses, all those kind of things. And this is short-term activation and a city asset, a community asset. And we said, hey, we can bring some real value with some of the expertise and experience that we'll talk about in a little bit. So the first thing I want to kind of touch on, as we aim to be a destination here in Rochester, there's three kind of core tenets that I think go into that, right? It's jobs, it's development, and then it's vibrancy. So jobs, we need to give people a reason to come be here in Rochester, attract people. And development, we need to grow the landscape, what it looks like, as the city changes, whether it's restaurants or the new Hilton being built. And then vibrancy, right? That's the culture piece, the arts, the entertainment. That's the real reasons why professionals are here, as far as why they stay here and how we can attract more people to come here. I think we're doing a great job on checking off, the jobs, having one of the lowest unemployment rates ever, which is great. It's also scary at the same time. And then also, from the development piece, obviously we see everything that's being built, but now we have a real opportunity to focus on vibrancy, and the Chateau can be a real focal point in that ecosystem that creates that. So let Steve introduce him, and then I'll talk a little bit about myself as well.
I'm Steve Harick with the Entourage Events Group out of Minneapolis. I would thank you for the opportunity today to give us the chance to propose some good plans for this beautiful building, the historic building. So we come from the background of hospitality. I've been in the hospitality business for over 15 years. Our company today in Minneapolis, we're heavy events production and catering company. We do manage and run the events into at First Avenue, the Palace Theater in St. Paul, the Brave New Workshop, the Fine Line Music Cafe, the famous, now iconic Minneapolis Armory, and the Minneapolis Event Centers, which are located in the San Antonio, Maine building that is on the Mississippi River. So we're invested in the events business. We do work with the music booking companies like Live Nations and AEG and First Avenue, which is a very talented group out of Minneapolis that brings a lot of upcoming bands and artists from ground up and do participate in building the names of the bands. And we also work with the big players like Live Nations and AEG. As far as events, today we produce about 450 events a year in Minneapolis, and some of them are out of state. Our company is divided into 3 divisions. The event management company that does the management of the events, the bookings, the sales, the planning, and the elite catering division, which does the food and beverage of the events, and the production company, which does the AV productions and the decor and everything that goes along the event. So we are a convenient one-stop shop for a client, corporate clients or wedding clients, or on the concert side, we provide the venue, we provide the management, the ticketing service. We're experienced in negotiating ticketing services with Ticketmaster, et cetera. So today we see an opportunity in this beautiful venue to be similar to the Palace or the Fine Line Music Cafe or First Avenue in Minneapolis, where it can be activated to bring and attract a lot of the upcoming music bands that are local or in the area that want to play First Avenue or play 700 and 800 cap venue. And also we believe it's a very attractive venue to host a lot of private events, corporate events, luncheons, exhibits, all type of events.
That's great. And so I'm Sunny Prabhakar, if I forgot to mention that in the beginning, in case you don't know me. Born and raised here in Rochester. I left to go to school in Des Moines and started my own company down there doing events management, and then moved back to Rochester, got married, started the family. My educational background is marketing management. Currently working for CWS as the digital marketing agency here in town, and I have a master's in business administration as well. I run the Commission Young Professionals Organization, which we've also been focusing on vibrancy by providing multiple different events, including Salute to the Fourth, as you all know, on July 4th. And so, that's really been a big passion piece for me, especially in the last 5 years as we've seen the Commission grow, is, how we really attracting and retaining young professionals. And it really comes from having like that higher level of vibrancy that I think our group can provide. So a little bit about our venues, Steve alluded to a little bit. So the Minneapolis Event Center is a historic building. The St. Anthony, Maine building is what it used to be before we turned it into an event center. The mansion at Uptown was the historic Walker Library in Uptown. That's what this image is from. So Steve he's the design guru. So he picks all the finishes and those pieces to really transform a venue. And the mansion specifically, he used a lot of the historic elements to shine on that space as well. The Minneapolis Armory is the largest event venue in the country that Steve and his team put together. And First Avenue, Palace Theater, Fine Line Music Cafe, Turf Club, Brave New Workshop, running all the private events in those spaces as well. So what's our plan for the Chateau? We have interim use. We have 3 years, potentially 5. We want to see it be really activated as a multi-purpose events venue. And that includes everything from live performances for music, theater, comedy, weddings, private events, corporate meetings, community celebrations and events. The nice thing with our team is that we have everything in-house, right? And we're very experienced in taking a room where a corporate meeting could be happening, in the morning and flipping it for a concert in the evening. Or we've had talks with Minnesota Children's Museum and some of the portable exhibits that they have. So having it be open for families during the day and then flipping it in for an evening event immediately after. Those are all the benefits of having everything from decor, production, AV, staging, catering, food and beverage all in one entity. You're able to make a lot of changes really quickly and on the fly. So talking about a little bit of our investment into the space, audiovisual, production, mobile staging, staff, mobile bars, catering stations, the sales and marketing pieces, food and beverage services, the general operating expenses, and all of that we'll take on. We're not going to ask for any of that cost, I guess, from the city. And everything that we're going to bring into the Chateau will all be modular. So it can be removed easily, it can be put in easily, from the catering to the mobile bars, the stages, everything will be modular. So we've done it in spaces currently, so we understand how to move in and move out from that side. So like I said, all in one, that's kind of like our bread and butter. There's no subcontractors going out. We use all of our own staff. We'll use all of our own products and everything there. When you have such a short-term use, ramp up is key, right? So the grand opening and getting things locked and loaded, the community's been waiting for the Chateau for years now to open up, and we want to be able to hit the ground running. And with our experience and team, we have the ability to do that. Steve, you want to talk a little bit about the expectation from the city, from the capital investment side?
Sure. So the improvements we're asking for to be completed on a venue would be the staircase from the Skyway into the building it's an easy access for anyone attending an event to come through the Skyway and enter the building. Enlarging the restrooms, making them a bigger restroom. We all know if you're attending a concert event, there's always a line to use the restrooms and not enough restrooms. And also building a small kitchen does not include any hoods or exhaust system for cooking the food. It will be just a plating kitchen that we bring in the food and plate it in there. So most of the improvements are to the building, that stays in the building. We're not asking for any investments into the production piece, the lighting, the sound system. All that stuff we bring in, we take out based on event needs. We bring the tables, we bring the chairs, we bring the lighting, we bring the rig, we bring anything needed to accommodate the event. And every event has different needs. So we see setting up and investing into a system that lives in there would service some events, but not other events. So any venues we currently have, we have a modular system of productions that we bring in, take out based on the event.
And then from the operating costs, we would say from the city standpoint, property taxes, the major repairs in the building, worst case scenario, if a pipe bursts, that's where we look for help from the city side, since the city would be owning the space on that level. Sales and marketing plan. So obviously we have a grand opening that we want to do with the community, and that we work with the city on, and making a real community open house. We'd want to ramp that up as quickly as possible following the different renovations, things that are happening. Also, one piece on the renovations, we have some ideas that we've talked to Beneke as well about. One piece that the city is looking at right now is putting down carpet into the Chateau Theater that they've already been budgeted for. I think for the interim use and for our purposes, it makes more sense to save the cost that we put into the carpet and we just polish the concrete floor. One, you won't have to deal with stains or spills, and it's easy to clean up. So there's things like that we can work with, that we've had experience in before the final construction is built out too. And then the community engagement piece. Obviously I've done a lot of that within the community here through the commission and through serving on boards and other places, but using some of those existing relationships and connections to program and activate the space for community use as well. The digital strategy from websites and social media. I mentioned that I work for CWS. We are the marketing partners for the Civic Theater Company, and I'm the strategist on that team. And we've taken their events, which we're doing 30 to 60% sell rates. So like the entire run was 30 to 60% sold. And the last 6 shows, we've done 98% to 100% with Diary of Anne Frank and Annie selling out months before. So using some of those same event marketing tactics that we've seen work really well in the community and using for the Chateau Theater. I mean, we have that experience. We have the game plans for that. Personally, I've done events like Elysium and other events to bring the community in. Recently, I also mentor a group of high school students on event marketing. They call them, I didn't come up with the name. They call themselves the 507 Liddy Committee. But we recently just did another high school dance at the Boys and Girls Club, which was a great partner. And we've taught them everything from ticketing to marketing to kicking kids out and hiring police and insurance and all of that. And they sold that out as well. And we could see that same sort of event coming into the Chateau and encouraging more experiential learning through that way as well. From the community engagement piece, obviously we got to have face-to-face meetings with the key stakeholders, having me and the boots on the ground that we have from our team to talk to RDA and DMC and City of Rochester, community organizations, local event organizers, the same conversations that I'm essentially having on a daily basis as well, but kind of growing it into the programming of the Chateau and how we're making sure we're hitting the needs of the organizations or the stakeholders there. We like to also hold open houses. I think there's some educational pieces that we can do from the community. There's a lot of different groups that want to do events, that want to do special events. I think I learned the hard way multiple times with the special events process through the city. So there's a lot of knowledge that I could probably share. And then we could work with the groups that want to do bigger events and do some open houses on those pieces as well. And then obviously attending community events. It's not just internally and bringing people to Chateau, it's also getting out into the community. And so part of our community engagement piece is going to be attending local events, representing the space at the Chateau and getting inside that as well. The digital strategy, we will fully invest into the website, the social media pieces, Facebook ads, Instagram, YouTube. We'd like to bring more video content in, especially from like the educational pieces that come there or the public events. We're going to be investing in some of the AV pieces that'll make live streaming really easy and available so that people can see what's happening at the Chateau even when they're not there. Just kind of open the doors a little bit. Me, I have a 1.5-year-old son, so getting out in the evenings is very difficult. A lot of meetings like this, I would be watching from home live stream. And so if we could, open the doors to the Chateau and some of the events that are happening there too via live stream, I think a lot of families or young families would appreciate that too. So really, it's more than a theater. This image here is even showing a cooking class from when the Chateau Theater was a historic theater. It's more than just, traditional theater. What we think of as a theater, it's arts, it's culture, it's entertainment, it's bringing the vibrancy. We've had great conversations with Mayo Clinic's Heritage Group as well, who has actual artifacts from the Chateau from way back when. And they have an exhibit planned that they could bring into the Chateau. We've talked about that. They're excited about, our open floor plan format that can be completely modular and shifted around for their programming as well. They actually have a lot of things that they can't even do at Mayo or invite the public into Mayo because of security reasons, which is pretty crazy of how many events they do. And so bringing the Chateau is going to allow them to expand into a bigger space, but then also allow the community to appreciate some of the artifacts that Mayo Clinic has as well, which we previously haven't had access to. And then before we get to the questions piece, and I'll let Steve have some final comments as well. Just want to read one of the letters of support that's in the packets that you have. This is from Leah B. She owns Canvas and Chardonnay, an outstanding young professional. She wrote, as one of Rochester's few remaining historical landmarks in central downtown, the Chateau has potential to house a flourishing arts and cultural movement. We are in support of the Entourage Events Group and the proposal for the space. The Canvas and Chardonnay's Rochester art heads will work with Entourage to fill the space with programming, activities, community outreach, ticketed events, live music, art exhibitions, and private rentals. And they opened their doors at Canvas Chardonnay in 2013, becoming Rochester's first studio, offering community art classes. And after 6 years of partnering with local artists, musicians, program coordinators, local businesses, and nonprofits, we have accumulated and refined the necessary resources and talent to facilitate successful programming. So we represent nearly 2 decades of combined Rochester arts engagement with consistent programming and dedication to a lifetime in the arts. Our team has, influencers from social networks reach exceeding 25,000 followers. We all do better when we all do better. Rochester is no exception. We look forward to a stronger and healthier arts ecosystem as Entourage Events Group's vision for the Chateau becomes reality. We are confident our combined programming will rebirth the Chateau as a destination and asset to our ever-growing community. There's multiple letters of support that are in that packet as well that you can kind of read from various different groups. But I just think that, with our combined experience and able to get off the ground running really quickly to ramp up the Chateau in that short, intermittent use window, we're going to be able to maximize the community value. Steve, do you have final comments?
Sure. I believe you have a beautiful venue, you have a beautiful building, and that's a key to attract events. And on the music side, we have an advantage of bringing touring bands that do stop by Minneapolis to make a stop in Rochester because they're working with the same group. They're not working with a competitor group that's trying to compete with the shows in Minneapolis. So we can bring the same groups that are coming to Minneapolis. We'll do another date a following date in Rochester. In the live music scene, the touring bands and artists, they do, a big element is trusting the people they're working with and trusting the managers and the management and the operation and having the relationship. So we have an advantage by using our relationship to tell them, trust us, it's the same group that you're working with in Minneapolis that you're going to be working with in Rochester. Now, when it comes to private events and specifically to nonprofits, having the production, the catering, and the venue management under one umbrella gives us the advantage with working with tighter budgets that some nonprofits have, and we can produce the whole events up to their expectations with a tighter budget because we can move things around between the three different elements of the events. So that's an advantage we have with working with nonprofits. So I believe that this venue would have a huge success, and hopefully what we propose can live for so many years beyond the plan, the short-term plan, and becomes an iconic venues that bands would want to come and play here. And then you would always look on the calendar and see 15 to 25 shows coming up in the next couple months where you have something to do and being entertained.
All right, thank you. I had one quick question. This is probably for staff before we get started. Refresh my memory what the capacity of that building is, occupancy based on fire code.
Right now, it's 390.
I'm sorry, 300.
390.
Okay. All right, now, other questions, comments? Mr. Keen?
Yeah, thanks for being here, guys. I was doing a little scoring as we went through these different things, and the one I didn't pull out from yours is like that one of the three criteria was activation. I couldn't tell if you're thinking there's going to be one event a week or a big one once a month and some other smaller ones, or what type of feel do you think for activation?
Basically, we would like to activate 365 days a week. That is the plan. Mostly the weddings business comes in. The weddings business comes for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. This is when we see a lot of demands for the venue on the weekends, and the rest of the events fall between Mondays and Fridays. And on any event that want to happen during the day, but we have another event that can take place at night, this is where our experience comes in by what we call it, the word is flipping the venue, which is we load everything out, we load in the band, and then we strike, and by the morning you have the exhibit back in or whatever was happening during the day back in. So that, multiple activation within 24 hours is possible. And that's kind of what we're hoping, that we can attract business during the day hours and still have activations at night and bringing in musical events and et cetera for the late night entertainment.
Yeah, I would add to that. It's difficult to say we're going to do 80 events until we start booking, right? So I think, unless we were basing our projections on some of the stuff that you might have seen in the proposal that we sent over, based on what's already happening within the other venues that we have, based on experience. I think also in addition to what Steve was saying is that with the Entourage group, the experience in outdoor activation is really high as well. And so working with groups like the RDA and other places, we'd have the ability to use some of the existing infrastructure with the Chateau to activate the outdoor side of the plaza and other pieces there too. But yeah, activation, like Steve said, the goal would be 365.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And it will take more than a year to build the momentum, to build the reputation.
Mm-hmm.
So how the room performs as far as sound, how it does perform as far as layout, what works best, floor planning. It takes time to learn the room, and then that's when you can make more suggestions and attract more event and go to different needs. But the floor plan that we're keeping a wide open floor plan, nothing fixed, would help us set up the room for many different events to accommodate all sort of events.
All right, anyone else? Mr. Wojcik?
Going through the materials, one of the things that I think you've maybe explained some of it, there was a percentage breakout in terms of public events versus private events, and the public event percentage was only at 28%. When you're talking about, is that because that's factoring in multiple events per day, or realistically, you're talking about activating the building, 365, but of that 365, what percentage would be events that were either ticketed or open to the public in other forms?
Any event that is not a corporate event or a nonprofit like gala event would be open to the public.
Yeah, it's tough to pare that down, right? Because if I book the Chateau for 9 to 10 for a CWS meeting, and then Nick books that next room from 11 to 12 has 2 private meetings within the same space, right? So we would, if we were thinking of like holistically what that looks like versus multiple groups booking different times within the space for meeting space or corporate meeting space, the majority will be open to the public and ticketed events.
And maybe let me expand on that question a little bit to say, once you've ramped up to, whatever stable capacity is here, in a given week, how many evenings of entertainment might we find in the venue?
How many?
Yeah.
It all depends on who's performing and how can we attract the groups to which will be pretty much trying to attract every single group that would fit in a venue that's performing Minneapolis to bring them here. That would be the goal.
Yeah.
Now, if we can get 50%, 80% of them, that's hard to tell today. But our goal is to, bring as many as we can down here.
Will Rochester buy tickets?
I can interject on that. That's a great question.
It
right?
is.
That's always the number one.
I want to know, will Rochester buy tickets?
We will with the right research, right?
Yeah.
So even we take the My Time, My Music example with Charlie Parr on a Monday night, sold out. So it's proven the model that Rochester will buy tickets. We did Elysium where we didn't tell anyone the venue, the artist, or anyone, and it was sold out. So I think Rochester's hungry for that sort of entertainment and something out of the usual. I think when we do bring Minneapolis bands, they're obviously, if they're going to perform on a peak night in Minneapolis, it's going to be on an off night here, right? So it's an opportunity where we're seeing people show up on off nights in Rochester when it's a recognizable name, and that's where we have the opportunity to do that with our partnerships in Minneapolis.
And let me add to, by keeping the venue as an open floor plan, we can always shrink the venue down to half capacity. So if the band is not selling out, we can shrink it down. That way we're always providing a good show, sellout show for the band, and it's a good experience. So we do that now in Minneapolis, and it helps a lot, give a good experience.
Okay. And then maybe let me, stop me if I'll get you in trouble with any of this, but Minnesota produces a tremendous amount of musical talent locally and regionally. A couple things I'm interested in is how would you see this opportunity potentially growing and cross-pollinating the artist community between here and in the Twin Cities? And also, are there potentially what kind of acts, and if you can't name names, I get it, but who makes for who are some of the regional acts that you might see down here in partnership with an event going on in the Twin Cities? Hypotheticals are great. Won't hold you to it.
Well, basically the way you develop a band or an act or a performer or a comedian is they start small with a small audience. And the way I keep using First Avenue as an example because they're an amazing group that has built bands from nothing to now to selling out stadiums. They start with their 7th entry room, which is a 200 cap room, and they take them next to the Fine Line, which is a 500 to 600 cap, and then they take them back to First Avenue, which is a 15. So basically, for any local artist or anybody, a band, what are their opportunities today to explore, present themselves to an audience or attract an audience? And that venue would be their opportunity. It's the stage to step up and start something or perform, even with a small audience. We can shrink the room and give them a good, packed room. And that's where I think they would look to move on. And by bringing bands that are in Minneapolis that want to be heard down here and build an audience here and fans, that's also an opportunity for them to come down here because we're just pretty close, and we consider very close neighbors. So, but who would come here? We're gonna invite everybody to come down here, and we might take a loss on some of them. And say, you know what, come down here. We cannot collect as much as we hope for tickets, and we discount the tickets and we pack the room and we'll take a loss, but at least we made an introduction and created a good entertainment.
I think just to add on that from the local aspect to the advantage to us doing everything from production to AV, food and beverage is that we can afford to bring in a local group. Like I was talking to Cameron earlier from Push and Turn. If they want to throw their own event, we can have them come in at a really low cost from the room side because it's a community asset where we can run their food and beverage and make up our staff costs on that and able to serve the community in that way too. We see a lot of bands and groups and acts trying to do their own events, but finding it hard to find affordable event space. I guess even like most spaces are between that 1,000 to 1,500 if they don't own their own or don't run their own food and beverage, which makes it really puts the bands at a disadvantage if they want to do their own, because it's essentially worthless at that point. So that's why we can step in and say, okay, here's the beautiful venue. We have the AV, the staging, everything. You pack the house, and we'll start the relationship that way.
Last question for me. I won't say I promise, but probably last question from me. As you look at this venue and you take a look at the other potentially competing venues that are in town, relieve my fears that we're not competing with ourselves in some of this. What makes this venue unique or different that's not going to necessarily hurt another venue?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, from some of the research we've done, and obviously we'll work with city staff and city planning on, is that if we can expand the bathrooms a little bit, that's one of the main things that are holding us back from a capacity side. So one thing that could be is the capacity size of the venue. Also, though, too, right? We are the RFP is for operations and management of the space, right? Not the programming of the space. So while we're happy to help in some of the programming pieces, because we have those relationships and that connection, we really want to bring in new things and from the community side, like they said, the Mayo Clinic Heritage exhibits, to maybe potentially working with EDG and some of their groups, and the Minnesota Children's Museum, and having an activated space for kids to play. Because of the way that it's located downtown with the access to the visitors and the families that are here too, we want to be mindful of that. And I don't think we're seeing a space right now that's fitting that need in the heart of the city.
The shape of the building, the historic part of the building is very attractive. Walking in the building and a large high ceiling is very attractive. The outdoor alley is a cool element that can be also activated with events. The outdoor plaza is great. The location is amazing. So all these plays a great role. Accessibility through a skyway. All this is a great asset to the success of the venue. I think it will be a unique venue and very different than others.
Mr. Campion?
In the proposal, and I'll be quick, there's a profit sharing setup. Do you profit share with other communities?
Currently?
Yeah.
No, we don't.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Palmer?
Can you tell me the differences in the proposal that you had for the Armory and for this? And is it a different use, or how did you look at it differently?
Yeah, very much so a different use from the Armory proposal that we had initially had with the designs that we had done, and the architectural renderings were for a 1,700 person venue versus the smaller venue. So a little bit different in the programming that would happen there. But then also too, this being a community asset versus the Armory building we have a lot of fixed costs, right? Overhead costs from the mortgage to repairs and those kind of things. Here now we have the ability to use our experience to allow the community to come in for different events, whether it be nonprofit groups or bands or things like that we mentioned, at a very low or inexpensive cost to them, while we cover staffing costs and marketing costs on food and beverage and those kind of things. So it's a little bit different model. And then also on the ramp up of activity, we were going to heavily invest in some of the decor and pieces with the Armory, and the build out would have taken close to a year to complete. Here we're going to bring in modular pieces, modular sound systems. Part of our proposal you saw was we're going to work with you guys on the bathroom finishes and tile and all those kind of pieces. But the rest of the build out should ramp up very quickly. So we should be able to get people in and activate the space very quickly.
If you had to buy the building, how would your proposal change?
Go ahead.
First, the building is very attractive because it does not have any columns. For doing events in there, the open wide space with the high ceiling is more valuable than the Armory was, because the Armory had columns in the building. And if we had a mortgage or we had a payment to make on a building, we would not be able to give the space $0 for room fee or rental fee. Then we have to charge rental fee to pay for the mortgage and the facility repairs and all that. But now with the ability to have the building owned by the city, we can offer it to community members and nonprofits at no cost for the room. We'll just charge for food and beverage and the labor to execute the event.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Parrish, what would you like to see next? Are you looking for some discussion, some idea of whether there's a consensus? What?
So, President, members of the council, I think you have a couple of opportunities here. I think you can provide some preliminary discussion. There is some additional outreach and engagement planned, and I maybe defer to Jenna just momentarily, that would allow you to get some additional community feedback as you consider your decision. I think ultimately we'd be moving toward the May 6th council meeting, hoping to get a direction from you on a specific team that you'd like us to continue discussions with. So I think at this point, maybe we would, ask the council to kind of structure the conversation that way. And then if also give us guidance, if you would like to have staff prepare a recommendation based on the conversation that you and insight you might offer, or if you'd just like to have a conversation at the May 6th meeting and try to develop some consensus that way. So, Jenna, can you just talk through the next?
Yep, absolutely. So as Aaron mentioned, we will have a set of 5 questions on our Polko site, which is, as you all know, a new site that we have to engage with the community. So those questions will be live after the conclusion of this. We have the summary of the presentations available via the city website on the Chateau page, which we'll share as well. And then further out, as Aaron mentioned, obviously, hopefully a direction by May 6th. And then there will also be an open house on the plaza as a part of the city, as a part of Heart of the City. And we would seek to have that preferred or that operator meeting with the public as well. So the Polko questions would be open just for a little under a week here. And then again, that summary and information would be provided to you all as a part of the May 6th packet.
All right, Mr. Bilderback?
Just a question, Aaron. Is there an opportunity for public to make comment to council directly or just on their own out and about in the public? So on May 6th, what's that coming back as?
So definitely could be on the agenda. Would be on the agenda May 6th. You have the Polko platform, so there's electronic, mechanisms. We could consolidate that feedback for you, so you'd have the benefit of that. And then obviously the council on their agenda has an open forum.
I guess my question is, it coming on May 6th? Is it coming back as a public hearing? Recommendations? What are you bringing it back as?
It's not necessarily a formal public hearing. It would just be on the regular agenda, a report and recommendation type of item. So we could certainly do it if you prefer it that way, but it's not necessarily a requirement in terms of how you have to consider this. And so we would typically just put it on reports and recommendations.
And I guess that's my question, because if the general public wishes to get a hold of us and share their thoughts, when it comes back on May 6th, if we're going to put letters and recommendations, then it's not going to have an opportunity to speak to us. They need to speak to us beforehand. And that's what I want to make sure we get done, is if it's not a public hearing, make sure that we let everybody know now, so that if there is questions or are concerns, they get to us before that meeting.
Mr. Reimer?
I think on that note, we're happy to put it on as a public hearing if that's a council's desire for that day. Otherwise, we'll make it clear in the communication that we send out as you just asked. So
Yeah.
if the council would like to have it there, even though it's not our normal course of action, that's not a problem.
Okay, Mr. Wojcik?
And I want to hear more from the community. I specifically have said in advance that I don't want to make a decision tonight because I think it's appropriate for the community to view these presentations too. A lot of times we're just following a set of rules that we don't have flexibility in. This is kind of cool because we actually get to engage the community and explore our visions a little bit. A couple things that I am looking for from staff, just my opinion that I think would be helpful is these all have some various capital costs. None of them are too extreme, but my expectation is these would be that those would be done with DMC funds, and I just want to verify ahead of time that that's the case. And if that's not the case, you can just let us know about that. I'm interested in, if not a direct recommendation from professional staff, at least some conversation on the 3 different proposals on how staff views them. And if staff did have the consensus of a clear recommendation, I think I would like to know that too. We do have a lot of really talented people, even in this, in this area as well, on staff. And I really do care what our experts and our professionals think about it as well. I'm also interested too, long-term, the Chateau is largely a DMC project, so I'm interested in potentially feedback from that group, the EDA as well, potentially. I do want, whatever we decide to do, I'm interested in a little discussion from staff on how what we're doing now ensures a clear pathway to how we can someday use the 40% tax credits if we were to go that route to restore the theater, because I know that's going to be a huge part of the capital cost. And lastly, I don't necessarily care if there's a public hearing or not. My preference is for everybody. My preference is if there's people in the community that want to comment, I would rather folks get it to staff ahead of time so it can be in the packet because we have time to read the packet and think about the packet before the meeting. Public hearings are good. We tend to hear a lot of times though from things that are kind of outside of the realms of what we're looking for. We don't necessarily have the time to process everything that we're hearing right there. And also, you know, sometimes there's a lot of comments that are just reactions to other comments that are being made. So if you truly want to be heard, I would just encourage everybody to, you know, get that information to staff so it can be in our packets ahead of the discussion. Those are my comments.
Mr. Campion?
So we have today's packet available online. I would just, as part of a communication effort, I think making some landing page where the materials are available. Do we already have this?
We do. It's currently on the city website underneath the admin tab, and it has all the background information on the Chateau, be it from the construction updates to, you know, all the reuse task force information. We will make available, there are some, as you said, some of the presentations and materials that were shared this evening with you. We'll ensure that all of those are on there, as well as the video from the meeting this evening as well. So we'll ensure that that's all uploaded onto that page, as well as shared with the community.
And I think we'll move that page so it's front and center, so you don't have to dig for it.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, as part of whatever promotional activity we do with, I think is it Polko? Is that what you're saying? Polko? Gosh, that sounds like polka. Polko.
Got a problem with polka?
No more than anything else. But as we promote that, I think we've been doing some sponsored stuff on Facebook to, I think connecting people directly to the kind of information is really important because, you know, too often those are kind of poor, not easily informed opinions that are weighing in there. So I think that's important. And I would, you know, echo Councilmember Wojcik's call that we focus on getting feedback into the packet in written form, because I think in terms of the volume, you know, people submitting petitions, which is certainly a good a good prop to use. It's also like, if we're going to read through that stuff and actually digest it, I think getting it before the meeting is really critical. So just as we go through this, hopefully we can collate as much as we can into the packet prior to starting. So.
And Councilmember, if I just could answer to that, as I mentioned, there are 5 questions. All have the summary information. We'll include links to the others. Just a quick point of education for the community. That platform does allow you both to respond to the question via vote and then also provide one text comment for each of those questions. And the platform does help us identify the wards in which those community members reside. So for all of you, that does help give an indication of how your particular constituents are responding to these questions as well. And again, all of that summary data and those comments would be included in the packet in preparation for the May 6th meeting.
I have Mr. Palmer next.
I'm not an art person, and I'm listening to this, that we bought a building that we don't know what to do with it. And I find that hard to, and most people I've talked to find that hard. I would like to see us look at selling the building. I think that, you know, the proposals we heard, I look at the Arts Center, how much we contribute to that, 125 Live, the Civic Theater, the Civic Center. There's a lot of these things I think could be done there. We already own those. And I get that from the people I talk to in the world. I mean, the citizens of Rochester have already contributed a lot to the arts. And to fit something into this building, just to fit something into this building doesn't make sense. But I think if we sold it and didn't have it as an asset, I think the old Armory is an example of something that worked out really, really well. We had 3 nice proposals. I don't want to limit ourselves to just trying to fit something in because we own it. So those are my comments.
Mr. Keen?
Yeah, let me just respond to Councilman Palmer, because I don't want to go back through the history, but my view is the city does own this, and where we're inviting the community in at this point, I think we're on a certain path, and unless that breaks down, I'd rather not open it up to let's go back and do the whole thing. But I guess we'll have to decide that as a group. The thing that when I one comment I'd make, or 2 comments, I have been getting community feedback on this meeting and on the proposals, as expected, they line up much more in support of the local proposals. The one thing I'd like help from staff is just this question of activation, which I think is key when we're talking about this short term, I'll call it 3 to 5 years, but to try to score these things by their ability to activate and bring the building to bear on the vibrancy of the community. I'm trying to do that through these numbers, but I'm looking more for a realistic review of those, and I think that would help me in the discussions to come.
So, and one of the reservations I have, I suppose, is clearly, along Mr. Palmer's comments, we've invested quite a bit of money in this facility already, purchase, and then now some renovation, which is all excellent work. I'm a little reluctant, to invest more money in all of the proposals in front of us, or have that sort of a request. When do we stop throwing money at it? And so it's maybe a little different twist on what Mr. Palmer was saying. And I think if I'm not mistaken, the last time with the Armory, we actually at one point didn't accept any of the proposals, and we kind of started over. So I wouldn't want people to think these are our only 3 choices. We can choose to do something else, whether it be entertain other proposals, do something different with the building altogether, Anyway, Mayor Norton.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank all 3 groups for their presentations this evening. It was interesting to hear them, the differences and similarities. A couple things I'm looking for is financial viability, not an ongoing drag on the community. So that's very important to me. I love this building. I frankly am glad that we kept it and preserved it. I don't know about ownership, but we have it. It's ours, and I think we can make good with that. So a couple of things I think, I'm not sure where the questions on Polco are going to go, but I think it's important that this not be a popularity contest about who has the most friends in town. I think people need to really think hard about activating this for millions of visitors a year who are hanging around downtown during the day, who are looking for something to do, as well as activating it for the people who live here, who want to go because they have wonderful feelings about this building, many of us do, and who want to see it activated for themselves as well. So I think this has to be really well thought out about who are we serving with this building. And it can't just be for one small group of people at one time of the day. It really does need to be, if it's going, and I think to be financially viable, it's going to need to be activated for a long term, as day in and day out as you possibly can activate it. So I just wanted to throw that in. To me, I think it's great to get community feedback, but I don't want it to be a popularity contest about who knows who. I want it to really be about what's the best for this community.
Have Mr. Bilderback next.
Yeah, and I think it's important, tagging on to what the mayor said, I think it's important that we go back to remember why we purchased the building in the first place. For those of us that were on the council, we did it because it was a community asset, and we wanted to make it. We talked about the heart of the city and all the DMC projects, and remember, we got this because we wanted to have a place where the community could gather, could come to. So when they talk about how long is it open, and who is it open to, that was a part of this that was discussion way back. And maybe it would be good to bring out some of those past discussions or records of when we were discussing this, so we could understand and remember exactly why we did this and the importance that we did it. And we did this, again, I think it's important that we speak with the group that participated with us, which was we got Mayo to give us $500,000 to purchase this too. It was a $5.5 million Rochester investment, a $500,000 Mayo investment. But the whole goal was to make sure that the community had a place to go to. This was a community event facility. We can call everything the heart, and the former mayor is here, and I know that he many times talked about, when we talked about heart of the city, that the Chateau is really the heart of the city. It's where most of us grew up, and it was the middle of Rochester. So think about that as well. I think it's important that everything is open. I want to go back to my first point. If this is not a public hearing, please make that announcement so that people know where they have to get their comments to us, or send them in. I like the idea of sending them in writing, so we have a chance to read them. We all love to read on the weekends. That's our goal on the council. But please I want to make sure that everybody understands how they can share this, because when we did this was a very emotional piece for many people in this city. And we heard it even, the former mayor talked about his dating his wife there, well before she became his wife. So I think this is a part, and I think it is important for us to think about what's the best piece for this for our community. And again, please, Mr. Reimer, make sure that if it's not a public hearing, we make note of that and put it out there so people know they can send in their thoughts, and we can get it in writing.
Mr. Wojcik, then Mr. Palmer.
I agree with, I was here for the history of some of this. I'm not a Rochester native. I don't have, for me, it was a bookstore for a little bit of time. And, then it's been mostly vacant since then. So I don't have that same history. And I think a lot of people in Rochester don't necessarily have that same history. I do understand that sunk cost is never a motivation for future expenditures. And I think that, this is one of those assets where kind of each generation, each council has to decide how valuable it is for the community as well. And with the new council was seated for about 2.5 hours before we undid 40 years of transparency policy. So it was, the changes do happen, but I would say that I'm not in favor at this point of, pursuing a sale of the building, but I would be open to, if we want to put it out there as a poll question, a separate one, just get some community feedback on it. Doesn't hurt to ask the question necessarily. And I also think that there's sometimes too granular of a look at the two options for long-term asset ownership is a publicly owned building or a privately owned building. There's really so many more options than that these days. We're going to be having a discussion about public-private partnerships and P3s. And actually to get those historic tax credits, you have to have a private entity, at least with a controlling interest in the building for some period of time. So there's a number of different ways that has this largely operating like a private building, even paying property taxes that doesn't involve an outright sale. So I do want to keep my options open at this point. This is data gathering for me.
Mr. Palmer.
Well, I'd like to make it clear that I do enjoy the building. I think that it's nice that we own it. I think that we can always put a covenant on it. We can always ask for people to look at it. I did attend, and I went to Mary Poppins there as a kid. So, I have a great memory of that. In saying that, though, you have to remember, and you look at history, and everybody's history is a little bit different. But if you look 30 years ago, when the theater closed, and we had a restaurant person that kind of went belly up on it, and then we decided a local person would buy it. They made it into a Barnes & Noble bookstore, which was fantastic, and lots of people used it, and it was there, and it had lots of neat public involvement. And businesses change, and so that business went under and left the downtown. I don't think not having it be, I think having it owned by somebody else and taking those tax credits is not a bad thing. It's not limiting it. I'm not knocking the 3 people who came here and had neat things, but when I look at those neat things that they were asking for, I could see them being in the Art Center. We spent $347,000 last year to subsidize the Art Center. We've got the Civic Theater sitting there at $200,000 that we subsidized it. And are we going to take our pie of the people who are going to use these things and make it smaller, and have to share those same people with what we already own? So we're kind of diluting our own selves on that. I just think the option should be out there. And I like Mr. Wojcik's idea of putting it on there as the first question: should it be publicly owned or should it be privately owned? With the caveat, we're not tearing it down. We can put a covenant on it that says that it's going to stay the historic building, and that you're going to keep it maintained correctly. Nobody wants to see it torn down. I'll be right there with Mayor Brady, chaining myself at the front door to not let them tear it down. But I think that we have to have those options, and that's what I hear from average people, and that's the people I talk with. So I want to keep that option open.
Okay. Mr. Campion?
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to talk about a little bit is, some of the financials that are in here are a little bit worrying. And from the standpoint of like cap rate of some of the facility, I'm pretty nervous about where this puts us for some of what they're showing for net revenue on a few of the proposals. So, there's this kind of idea of selling the building. From what I'm seeing of what's being done inside, a lot of commercial investment are going to have a hard time making it work at the price that we paid for it. I think we should be pretty honest about that based on the numbers that are in this report of what people are seeing for net revenue. This is going to be harder to do than I think a lot of the talk. So my concern is we're also planning a construction project out there. Spoiler alert. So people that are projecting a nice smooth linear increase, year 2, 3, we're talking about a construction project. So just as easy as year 2 and 3 can look like a 50% increase, they can look like a 25% hit, and you don't have to look far down the road to see how construction can cause some depression to event rates. So food for thought. I think we have to be really earnest and honest with the evaluation. I would like to see some due diligence done on the numbers that were presented here. To that extent, the Entourage project, I don't see a net income. I see a gross revenue statement. So we may want to collect that from them to make sure we can do kind of a cap analysis on what their project looks like. But frankly, there are two sides to this. There's what is the vision, which is really important to me. What do I envision that this looks like down on Peace Plaza when I'm walking through? And how does the activation help our city? And there's this other financial part that we have to be really comfortable with before we move forward here. All that being said, I'm for leaving everything on the table when it comes to 3, 4, 5 years from now and investigating our options. I think it wouldn't be doing the right by the citizens of Rochester to not keep those options on the table. But I think in the meantime, we got 3 really solid options for how we're going to move forward here, and I look forward to kind of discussing that with the community.
All right, any final comments before we wrap up?
Just to reflect back what we heard, I mean, I think we will target May 6th for you to have this as a discussion point, feedback collected in advance, in written form preferably, and consistent with the communications plan Jenna had notified. We will provide the framework for either a staff recommendation or additional due diligence and feedback on the information that you've requested, and we'll do some additional evaluation of the financial viability and see if there's any additional opportunity to look at that. And I think most of the other questions were sort of more future focused. The one thing I would caution against is putting out this ask to the public right now, and especially if it's not something the council is oriented toward at this point, of confusing the operators, and the proposals we're reviewing now with the potential sale of the building. I mean, there were 2 very different things, and you may get to that conversation when you do that. I just think there has to be a bigger community conversation around the idea of selling it if that's something you want to do. So I think we're unsure on how you'd want to proceed with getting feedback on that particular point. So if you have additional definition to that, that'd be appreciated. But I do see that could create a confusion of the issues in terms of what you're trying to discuss at this point in time, if you really do want to have a conversation about that. And then lastly, we'll confirm, but I'll just tell you that any recommended capital improvements will be requested at the May DMC board meeting for consideration for DMC funding.
Mr. Wojcik?
And since I was kind of the instigator and throwing that question there, I have no interest in selling the facility in the foreseeable future. So that, I'm fairly confident I knew how that question would come back, which is part of the reason why I was willing to throw out there. But if staff feels that we're going to confuse it by having it out there now, I think it's worth something it's worth exploring. But if it confuses things right now, I don't necessarily want to insist that it happen right now.
Mr. Keen?
Yeah, I want to go back to the staff on this too. Again, we need that guidance, and we don't want to be whipshawing requests for input from the community, especially if we don't have the the wherewithal right now or the direction. My view right now is we're in a process with these three things. I think, like President Saver said, it may end up with nothing selected, but I think we're in that process right now, and that's what the communication should support.
Mr. Palmer.
Well, I think out of transparency, we should allow people to vote and see if we want to have it be sold or with that on there, and I think that makes sense. I think we should have a public hearing. I think hearing from the public and have them come here and say, I like this or I don't like that. That's one way of doing it. There's doing surveys. There's not everybody who has a computer. So, you know, there's a accessibility issue for some people who can't do that on the computer. So that's always been dear to me. So I want to make sure we're transparent on what we're doing.
Okay, Mr. Campion.
Yeah, we were elected as representatives so that we didn't have to do a popular vote on things like this. And it's important that people go on the record if their intent is to sell something like this. So I would just say, since we're not in a formal meeting and can't take a vote on it, the last vote of the council was to move forward with RFP process. And if people want to bring forward during a formal meeting a motion to change the direction for the council, they can. The one other thing I wanted to do is to ensure that all of the potential operators are made aware of the construction schedule for Heart of the City on the plaza side, and we give an opportunity to resubmit finances with that information available and make that available to the council, so we can be sure we're operating with the best possible vision of what's going to happen. But I don't think it should be surprising that during a meeting where we're talking about the future transitional use of the facility, that talking about the sale of the facility gives people whiplash. I mean, that is the point, I guess. I would guess why people brought it up. But overall, that's something to be taken up as a formal action in the council and not something to just, spark a conversation while we're discussing this operational use.
All right. I think we can conclude for today. I think staff will be hearing comments from council and community and so forth. And we're at 7 p.m. So we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you to all the presenters.